Now, it's been a Europe-themed second day of the World Economic Forum in Davos, and it has seen Angela Merkel warn about poisonous populism. She told leaders at the forum that isolationism and protectionism are not solutions to the economic challenges facing countries around the world. The leader of the Chinese delegation also addressed leaders there, and he said that China this year will roll out fresh market opening measures that could exceed expectations. Liu He also said that China will ease restrictions for foreign companies in the country's manufacturing and service sectors.
Liu He began his speech Wednesday in Davos by reviewing Chinese efforts in promoting economic globalization in 2017.
Over the past year, in line with the propositions of President Xi, China has stood firm against all forms of protectionism. We have worked to strengthen the protection of property rights and promote fair competition. Just as important, we have broadened access to our financial markets and taken the initiative to increase imports. With efforts to advance the Belt and Road Initiative, we are moving economic globalization forward with concrete actions.
Liu said China will roll out fresh market opening measures this year as the country marks the 40th anniversary of Chinese reforms and opening up.
President Xi has made relevant decisions which will be focused on 4 areas. First, the opening up of the financial sector, which is very important. Second, the opening up of manufacturing sector and some services. Number 3, the protection of property rights, particularly intellectual property rights. And number 4, the increase of imports.
Liu also touched on diffusing risks in the financial sector and leverage control in China's domestic economy. He said that China's macro leverage ratio has been declining since last year's 4th quarter.
Shadow banking and hidden debt for local governments are serious problems we have to deal with. We will continue to make progress while maintaining stability. In about 3 years' time, we will strive to bring the overall leverage ratio under effective control, make the financial system more adaptable and better able to serve the real economy.
Liu called on a focus on the spillover effects of monetary policy in major economies in the near term. He added that changes in the stock, bond, and commodity markets also should be closely watched. He suggested in the midterm to focus on improving productivity and deposit rate changes in the major economies. 明天 CGTN.
Well, let's find out more about those discussions on ground at WEF today. Jack Botten now joins us in Davos. Jack, welcome to the show. Now, it seems like the Davos crowd is optimistic about the global economy looking forward, but based on some of those discussions, one can sense a growing sense of anxiety over whether these good times will last. What are you hearing on ground?
Well, the anxiety is well-founded. If we look even here in Europe, we see the economy is picking up again, but all of the problems that caused the Eurozone crisis are really still there, or the fundamental cause, and that was having a single monetary policy and a single interest rate, trying to cover all of these disparate Eurozone economies that really, can't use a one-size-fit-all currency. That's what caused the problem in the first place, and that is really still the same situation. So, we're seeing the economy picking up. It is really about a sense of confidence, but people are worried there might be a crash. The stock market's still picking up in America, but America burdened with debt. So there is optimism. There is a sense that perhaps there won't be another crash, but people are sort of cautiously looking ahead, seeing little signs like the bond market in the United States, short-term debt paying more than long-term debt, always an indicator that a recession might be around the corner, looking at those signs and looking for trouble ahead.
Now, shifting focus just slightly, Jack, there has been talk that African leaders would struggle to be part of the agenda this year in Davos, given, of course, the Brexit and other issues in countries like the US, as you mentioned. Now, a number of leaders, such as Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, are there. Are we seeing meaningful discussions around the continent?
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody here is really that interested in Brexit anymore. They see it as something inevitable. I mean, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, just walked behind the camera with such a small detail and crowd. For a second, I thought he was another delegate. This is the day that the focus is supposed to be on Europe, but really what we see is a lot of African delegations here attending the seminars, but really getting out there and doing what the forum is supposed to be about, engaging and doing business. That's what it was all about before the crash. And we've seen South Africa sending a very big delegation here led by Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba. You know, the South African delegation really trying to engage, drum up support for investment, convince investors that South Africa is a sound place to invest. But also, you know, we've got Emmanuel Mnangagwa, the Zimbabwe's new president, trying to turn the country around after more than 3 decades of rule by Robert Mugabe. He says there's been agricultural reforms. The country can now feed itself, but he wants more investment, more reforms. He's sort of brushed off US President Donald Trump's fairly insulting comments about African countries earlier, saying he's ready to talk with Trump. He'd like him to come build a golf course at Victoria Falls. But perhaps the most important announcement saying that, or, you know, discussions here saying that Zimbabwe will hold elections probably around July. He's prepared to accept any results, step aside if that's the case, and independent monitors are welcome.
Now, of course, China's President Xi Jinping didn't attend World Economic Forum this time, but we did see Liu He, who's, of course, a member of the CPC Central Committee. He did give a special address today. What were the highlights from that? And certainly, how is the Davos crowd responding to China's Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, with the exception of India, which has, you know, quite clearly stated it's not going to engage in the Belt and Road Initiative, the rest of the delegation, the delegates here have always been very supportive. They see it as, again, you know, the rollout of globalization. It's what the forum is all about. They don't like the pushback or the sense of growing isolationism that's being spearheaded by Donald Trump. So it's got a lot of support. Liu He, of course, being President Xi Jinping's economic advisor, really spelling out that China's reforms are going to keep going forward, that it is going to keep opening itself up to financial investment, to trade, that, you know, as it tries to take a greater lead in globalization, it too will allow that inward flow also of more imports. But lots of sessions here. China's biggest delegation ever. We had Jack Ma giving a speech, the founder of Alibaba. He's talking a lot about technology, a big theme here, saying, you know, a technological revolution led to the First World War, another technological revolution led to the Second World War, and we're in the midst of another technological revolution, so we have to be very careful that instead it is spent fighting things like poverty, crime, pollution, but also talking about trade again, the need for globalization, making a reference to those tariffs that Trump has placed on Chinese solar panels, saying that trade should not be used as a weapon.
Now, Jack, as the event goes on, we also heard that protesters broke through security to march against Trump, and certainly the World Economic Forum as well. How much of a disruption has that been to the forum?
It hasn't really been a disruption. We've seen a few banners here hanging from the houses, a few protesters have come in, but really those big protests have been in Zurich, a few hours drive away. We've seen thousands of protesters there. A lot of them from sort of hard left-leaning groups like Antifa, but also some, you know, mums and dads and families just there who oppose Trump marching with the crowd. At one point, seeming to get a little violent. There was some property damage in Zurich, but there's a lot of security leading up to Davos. It is very difficult to come in here and protest, and if you don't have a security pass hanging around your neck, then, you know, the honest truth is if you're not driving a big black German car and wearing a suit, it's very difficult to get past that security. So while we're seeing a lot of disruption in Zurich, there's probably going to be protests again overnight. It's not expected to disrupt the forum itself.
Well, many thanks for that update, Jack. Jack Barton joining us there in Davos, Switzerland.